So, healers. Maybe you're thinking of playing a healer in Shadowlands. Maybe you are thinking about using it for an off-spec, for dungeons, or for raids whenever your team needs. Maybe as an alt, to have a different experience every now and then. In this video then, we will be looking at all the different healer specs and how they are playing. Like in the past, melee, tank, and ranged DPS videos, this is not a tier list, this is not about comparing performances. We will be looking at the various gameplay differences and see what they offer. What are their healing tools and where they excel and focus. Is it more of a reactive or proactive healing toolkit? How are they at group healing or spot healing or sustained? What type of cooldowns they offer or utility, mana management, and of course their damaging abilities, and hopefully find a healer that ticks your boxes. Now, like the tanks, we won't be covering all the little nuances of how to heal in WoW, maybe one day in a specific video. This is just covering each spec in a pretty basic way. And lastly, like we said in the past, if you really enjoy a healer for its gameplay, go for it. All healers, like the tanks, are viable one way or another for most content in the game, even after tuning. Play what you enjoy. Let's start then with the Restoration Druid. Now, the Resto Druid has always been a healer I really enjoyed for both its simplicity, but also its ability of being able to set up certain abilities and cooldowns for some really fun results, depending on your skill and experience, while also having that hybrid side, allowing them to do some pretty cool things that other healers are usually unable to. At its core, you're going to find the gameplay mostly surrounding HOTS, healing over time effects. It's basically the dot spec of healers. Things like Rejuvenation, Life Bloom, Wild Growth, and are all HOTS, and your mastery clearly benefits that by increasing your healing throughput the more HOTS are present on a target. You do have direct healing abilities like regrowth, but even there it applies a hot. The only true direct healing abilities you have is Swiftment on a short cooldown and consuming a hot to top people up, or Nourish, the talent. But even there as well, it will benefit heavily from mastery, and generally regrowth and Swiftment is more than enough, especially with the comeback of nature's swiftness as a bigger emergency ability enhancing regrowth. And as you can probably tell, it is all about HOTS here on the Resto Druid. So what are the benefits and cons of this? Well, the immediate benefit is mobility. A lot of your abilities are instant cast or on pretty short casts, and they maintain a reasonable degree of sustained healing even after the set casts, meaning that you can be extremely mobile even while healing, jumping around and being able to do most everything, keeping up efflorescence, life blooms on the tank, wild growths, and rejuvenations, especially for CDs, will be your main focus and management in the spec. All again pretty much instant and quite mana efficient, which is great. You don't have to stress too much about that, like say on the Mistweaver Monk. We'll get there. And outside of actively healing, you can tap into your cat form for things like sprint or as a passive movement buff. So a druid is capable of moving through the battlefield very easily while keeping up healing. Not only that, their hybrid nature can also tap into having pretty high survivability due to bear form and your affinities, as well as DPS, but we'll discuss that in a second. So one of the very cool things I love to do as a Resto Druid is say in the middle of your regular healing rotation, quote unquote, if there's a soak mechanic or whatever it might be, you can quickly go into your cat form, rush over there, turn to a bear, soak that effectively, maybe even popping a frenzied regeneration or barrack skin if needed, while having your team safe with your HOTS. It can make you feel powerful and very useful, valuable in that sense, and also pretty damn fun to be doing more than just healing, going about everywhere in combat. Another reason why this is possible is because the nature of your healing abilities, it makes spread healing very easy to deal with. Basically meaning, as long as your team is in yards range, it's fine. For many healers, especially specs like Resto Shaman, the group being spread can make healing overall tougher. And you can suffer a bit from that as well, since efflorescence won't be as effective, but all of your other abilities won't suffer as much, and you can still be pretty effective and keep that sustained healing going. Tank healing as well is also pretty great because of this. Simply keeping up HOTS from Life Bloom to Rejuves allows you to pretty effectively tank heal easily without paying too much attention, and even having really good cooldown buffs such as Iron Bark to reduce their damage taken if needed and healing received. Then there's cooldowns. Resto has pretty powerful cooldowns that with skill and experience will become much more powerful, and is where a bit of the skill cap of Resto is gonna lie, especially in raid scenarios. Things like Innervate, Do Not Spend Mana for 10 seconds, Incarnation, Tranquility, or Flourish are all about preparation, setup, planning with your HOTS, and then execution. Due to the nature of HOTS and your mastery, to make those cooldowns more effective, you do need to somewhat predict when damage is gonna come or find the best moment to spread your HOTS to then pop your CDs effectively. So for an example, you know there's a big raid-wide damage coming, so you would say pop an Innervate if you need, so you can carefree apply all them HOTS to all of your team, wild growths, rejuves mainly, and so on, and then pop a flourish the minute that damage comes, so those HOTS last for longer and tick faster to help top people up or keep healing if they taking sustained damage. Then maybe you want a Tranquility off the back of that to benefit from mastery, though might be a bit of a overkill depending on the situation. Or use Incarnation, your Tree of Life form, during that setup and execution for more powerful healing overall. There's also the Fake Covenant ability, which is so fun for Resto, applying all these sort of healing HOTS, casting tons of abilities in just a few seconds, channeling while also being able to move. It's really powerful and fun, combos perfectly with things like Flourish, and it just looks so fun with your Druid performing all them animations. I really like it. So there's definitely this proactive nature to effectively heal on Resto Druid that when done right will be very satisfying and rewarding, and you do have a lot of cooldowns, so there's many different ways you can execute them, even in a reactive way with Incarnation or the Fey ability. Again, all depending on the situation, but you get the idea. You want to be a step ahead whenever possible, in a general sense. Alternatively, you do have talents that may focus more around a small group content like dungeons, things like photosynthesis, germination, Cenarian Ward, abundance, or Soul of the Forest to improve your spot healing a bit, or in general to be a bit more effective in reactive healing with regrowths and swiftments, on top of where you naturally excel. Not only that, for dungeons, Resto can do some pretty fun things with balance and feral affinities. Affinities on the Druid specs are pretty cool, emphasizing that hybrid side, and in all the other specs, they work alright, but they work so well here for Resto. For raiding, you might go for Bear for the damage reduction and to deal with mechanics like we said, but when you need damage or in a dungeon, you can go for Feral or Balanced Affinity with the Heart of the Wild talent and really pump damage when needed. And due to the nature of HOTS, you do have a bit more of a window in comparison to some other healers to freely do that. There's also an array of useful utility, especially for dungeons, things like Vortex, Cyclone, or Knockbacks, or an Enrage Purge, Roots, or a Stun. So you could be helping out the group in those ways as well to make the run smoother, especially with certain affixes. Now, what are the major cons that I found on Resto that might put you off? Well, Resto for some may be a bit boring since everything is pretty much on HOTS, right? Some people might find it boring, stale, or not interactive enough. But once you embrace its full toolkit, there's always something you could be doing, even damage, for free. The other is on the nature of HOTS. Your spot healing is not going to be as good as the other healers. It's not your specialty, so if it's something you enjoy in healing, you're not gonna find it here. The other is on cooldown usage, in raids especially. Your performance will be about your cooldowns by quite a bit, and how effectively you use them, set them up, and time them. There's a big setup and almost ramp-up time to spread things like rejuvenations, so misuse of them can result in not as great healing. Experience with a fight and the spec in general helps a lot here. Other than that, Resto is an amazing healer, easily being able to go beyond just healing with a lot of fun tools and cooldowns. Next, we have the other Resto spec, the Restoration Shaman. Now, the Shaman has a very interesting toolkit. Here, when it comes to healing tools, you're going to find amazing group-wide healing abilities. Just fantastic ones. One of the most enjoyable as well. Chain Heal is generally your bread and butter, especially in raids, with no cooldowns of any sort. You are only bound by your mana to continuously spot heal the group, which is fantastic, with talents and legendaries and alike to boost it further. Then on top of all of this, there's still Healing Rain, cooldowns, and optional talent abilities to further push the envelope on being the master at group healing and topping people up, especially when you take in consideration your mastery, which buffs your healing abilities the lower the HP your teammate is. There's a caveat, of course. All these abilities work best when your team is relatively close together. Large spread, and it's not going to work as good. Of course, we have single target based abilities as well. They are not as impressive as their counterparts, abilities such as Healing Surge, Wave, and Riptide. Riptide, along with Chain Heal, will grant some buffs called Tidal Waves, buffing cast times or heal throughput of Healing Surge or Wave, allowing you to focus on a single teammate to top them up whenever group healing isn't needed. More used in dungeon scenarios with talents and legendaries providing some extra synergies and benefits. There's of course the iconic Earth Shield, now baseline, to provide passive healing to your tank, though outside of that there's no Iron Bark like CD for your tank here on the Resto Shaman. Overall, those tools are not as enjoyable, your single target tools, as your group healing tools. Resto Shaman has the most fun and shines the most when healing clumps of people due to the nature of your abilities. And outside of Riptide and, well, healing Stream Totem, most of your abilities, be either single or group-wide, are on casts, some of which are also quite substantial, meaning that mobility is not the best outside of your very cool cooldown, Spirit Walker's Grace, allowing you to cast on the move, but yeah, outside of that, constant movement makes Shaman healing a little bit tougher, especially if you're coming from, say, a Rested Druid. Yeah, it can be a little bit of a shock. Now, there's more fun things here on the Resto Shaman that might tempt you over. Cooldowns, such as Healing Tide Totem, your big raid-wide healing CD that, well, is a totem, meaning that you don't have to channel or anything like that like some other healers. So, it allows you to combine that with your regular healing, say, Chain Heals, to maximize your group healing even more. There's also Ascendance, to replicate all of your healing done among allies. Cloudburst Totem, which is so fun, gathering a percentage of your healing abilities for a few seconds that then you may pop, spreading healing to everyone. Really rewarding, and with skill and experience will only get better, especially when using it proactively and planning around certain situations. Lots of fun things you can do there. Vesper Totem from the Kyrian Covenant also works in a similar way, bursting small bursts of healing with every healing ability or damaging abilities you do. Excellent to combo with your other CDs as well. Spirit Link Totem, a very unique and powerful totem ability that will evenly spread everyone's HP inside of its circle, meaning in a raid setting and at the right times will result in life-changing scenarios. Pretty awesome, pretty strong. Then there's other unique powerful abilities that may not be powerful all the time, but when they work really well, like say Ancestral Totem, providing a team member a reincarnation if they die near the set totem. Hell, your own reincarnation as well, which is both great. Both of these abilities are great for, say, progression. The Comeback of Manatide Totem, providing extra mana regen to all healers in the group, which is really cool, emphasizing that support side of the shamans. Earthen Wall Totem, reducing physical damage taken. Tremor Totem for fears. Slow Totem. Stun Totem. Root Totem. I mean, you really have a tool for a lot of the challenges presented in the game, especially in dungeons where the previously mentioned work the best. Speaking of which, what about damaging tools? Well, your DPS abilities are also pretty amazing. They barely cost mana, meaning you're free to do them, and there's an actual rotation of lightning bolts, flame shocks, lava burst procs, meaning that in the middle of your healing, especially with some macros to make your life easier, you can throw some DPS out. Hell, you may even chain lightning for some AoE cleave, or focus on DPS entirely when healing isn't needed, and to do decently well. You're also the only healer with an interrupt, an excellent interrupt with a 12-second cooldown. So that's another thing you can do in dungeons, and it's so awesome. Purge as well. I mean, there's so much for you to do. Not to forget BL and Hex and Earth Elemental. I mean, the list is quite long, and you do have a lot of keybinds, but you get the idea. Now, yes, they do have pretty good dungeon utility and tools overall, there's a lot to do, but the downside of this is, of course, your healing tools. They don't work as great here. They work perfectly fine, mind you, they just are more centered around large groups, group healing, and so on and so forth, right? It's simply not as exciting here. Not only that, Resto Shamans also suffer a bit from lack of survivability or defensives, and tank CDs. You have Astral Shift and some talents, but comparing to most other healers, somewhat lacking, so that's something to consider. All in all, Resto Shaman has a really cool toolkit with tons of unique abilities and tons to do if the situation calls for it. They have faults like every spec, but great many positives. Especially when it comes down to raids, they really can be a lot of fun there when it comes to raw healing. Also, am I the only one that missed pressing water and earth shield and seeing it swirling around my character? I really missed that. Up next, we have the Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin is likely the healer that suffers the most changes coming into Shadowlands, and here you're gonna find different toolkits to other healers, especially when it comes to group raid-wide CDs. At its core, you're gonna find the toolkits mostly focused around single target healing. It has the perfect abilities to spot heal and essentially snipe quote-unquote allies to top them bars with abilities like Holy Shock or Word of Glory, or simply your straightforward and powerful Flash of Light and Holy Light with buffs similar to tidal waves called Infusion of Light, coming from Holy Shocks, buffing them. On top of that, there's also your Beacon of Light that replicates healing done on a beaconed target, like say a tank, basically making you passively one of the best tank healers in a game. That's your main goal here on the Holy Paladin, prioritizing a single player that most needs a heal while passively heal your tanks. Basically, you are sort of an emergency medic. Here, you're also gonna find a point resource system on top of mana management, which is not gonna work for everyone. Holy Shock, DPS abilities like Crusader Strike or Hammer of Wrath, or healing your beaconed target will grant Holy Power, which will allow you to go for a big Word of Glory to top people up, or your main group heal ability, Light of Dawn, which brings us to your mastery as well. There's one thing you need to keep in mind as a Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin positioning matters because your mastery makes your healing stronger the closer you are to your target, and to effectively generate Holy Power, at least more consistently, you need to be in melee range for Crusader strikes. So, some people will enjoy that, some people will not, though you can always go in and out as much as you need and work around your mastery. So, building Holy Power, positioning, DPSing, using Holy Shocks, managing infusions, topping people up, using Holy Power spenders, and so on, will be the main plays here on Holy, with management and some planning, of course, coming to the forefront here, especially, again, due to Holy Power. So that said, all of this might be a point of contingency for a lot of people playing Holy. Maybe you don't like to go in melee range and manage Holy Power. Maybe you don't want to be harsh about the way the mastery works, right? Though you have talents to help there, and so on. Or maybe you love the idea of being in the fray, right in a battlefield type of healer, which does fit the fantasy of the Holy Paladin in a pretty cool way, as this emergency medieval medic, divine steeding your way to allies and foes alike. Now, what else does Holy brings to the table? Well, to go along with the previously mentioned fantasy, you're gonna find a healer with a very high survivability, great CDs and immunities to keep yourself safe and alive. If you hate to feel squishy or fragile as a healer, maybe the Holy Paladin might tempt you over then. Not only that, many of those benefits are found in utility and support as well for your teammates, with blessings and auras, things like Blessing of Sacrifice, working great against fellow tanks, or buffs, Blessing of Protection for a physical immunity, or Freedom for a movement immunity, and so on. Lay on Hands as a big emergency heal, which can be a lifesaver. A Stun to maybe interrupt a nasty ability in a dungeon. Hell, you are likely to be in melee range a lot of the time anyway, making it even easier to use. So when it comes to utility, there are very unique and powerful offerings to help out your team, with the option to double down on that with the Night Fae Covenant, offering even more blessings to act as a sort of support healer as well, from cooldown reductions or simply extra damage. What about other cooldowns? Well, you're not gonna find something like Tranquility. You don't really have a city that you press and just does a lot of raid-wide healing. Instead, there's Avenging Wrath or Holy Avenger, which simply buffs what you already do, like generating more holy power or more powerful healing throughput. That said, the Venthyr Covenant ability does sort of fill that role if you decide to go for that said covenant, healing everyone inside of its giant red circle. You do have Aura Mastery baseline, which with Devotion Aura gives you a 15% damage reduction to the whole group or raid, which is very powerful and unique to Holy. When it comes to group healing, it can be a bit lacking, especially if spread. We excel the most at single target spot healing. However, Light of Dawn fills the role if everyone is reasonably close together, and in dungeons, expect to use Beacon of Virtue, replacing your regular beacon, spreading healing to about 4 targets as you single target heal. It's extremely effective on a short cooldown, making your life much easier in that content, especially when you can predict that damage is coming. Then add that something like Divine Toll, Kyrian Covenant ability, and legendaries, providing an on-demand 5-target Holy Shock, which is simply epic to press to top the whole group, while also applying these small shields from the said legendary. You also have Glimmer of Light talent, which is a very interesting talent, especially for raids, essentially transforming your Holy Shock as a sort of passive group healing ability through this buff. It's a far cry from what it once was, but spreading Holy Shocks through your team is something you can expect to do, and that can be effective in its own right, providing some extra engaging gameplay and group healing while maintaining about the same fundamental gameplay and theme. Overall, Holy Paladin is a pretty aggressive healer. You can put out a lot of damage. I mean, you can even replace Avenging Wrath CD with Avenging Crusader and heal through damage from Crusader Strikes and Judgment, which is pretty goddamn badass. Spot healing is also simply amazing, especially if you like to snipe, quote-unquote again, health bars in raids, with Covenants offering some pretty interesting abilities depending on what you like to do in your Holy Paladin. Biggest cons outside of the subjective ones we mentioned tend to be, again, on group healing if spread, lack of mobility outside of Divine Steeds, but generally you do fine with some instant cast abilities, and tough mana management. Crusader Strikes currently consume a lot of mana. Maybe tuned, but kinda sucks when it's literally taking chunks of your mana to simply deal a little bit of damage and build holy power to make the spec work better. All in all, due to your unique toolkit, you will always be desired. Let's move on then over to the Priest, the Discipline Priest. Now, the Disc Priest is possibly the most unique healer and also possibly the healer and spec in the game with the highest skill cap. Straight off the bat, if you're looking for something with a pretty high skill ceiling with a lot of room to grow and learn, this will be perfect for you. On the other hand, if you're new to the game or healing in general, I wouldn't really recommend it, but you do you. So why is that? Well, Disc Priest is a hybrid of sorts. You don't heal as your typical healer with HOTS or with direct healing abilities. Instead, all will be around atonement buffs and absorb abilities. So, some of your abilities like Power Word Shield or Power Word Radiance applies atonement to a friendly target, which then, for the duration of the buff, a percentage of the damage that you deal to an enemy heals the atonement target. Things like Penance, Smite, Mind Blast, Dots, which subsequently then works as a HOT for any target that has atonement. So that's pretty awesome. This leads to a couple of things. One, you are outright the healer with the highest DPS, easily, which does matter. No one will beat you here. Sure, a paladin or a monk might get quite aggressive as well, but damaging and healing is your main gameplay, unlike those other specs. The other is that this is a pretty proactive healer. You always want to be a step ahead of everything, hence the high skill cap, among other things of course. Absorbs or damage reductions are also common themes and common abilities surrounding discipline, which are also pretty powerful, and it's always better to completely negate the damage that your team takes than having to heal it back up. It's a huge benefit that discipline priests have. But for them to work, you need to have them set up before damage actually comes. The same goal is applied to atonements. You want them to be active before damage comes, so you can keep your team nice and safe. The skill cap again. This in turn adds as well, if played right, pretty great sustained healing, with short cooldowns or big cooldowns like Schism, providing higher bursts of healing done every few seconds. Even group-wide, only bound by how many atonements you are able to apply and while your mana. Cooldowns are also pretty powerful, things like Rapture to apply stronger shields and with no debuff from the weakened soul, basically it's CD, playing a lot like you would spread rejuves on a rested Druid. There's also the talent option, Spirit Shell, replacing some healing abilities like Penance or Power Word Radiance to apply shields instead, which is awesome. More absorbs for big damage moments to negate some damage. Or Power Word Barrier for a raid-wide safe spot to outright reduce damage taken, or a singular powerful CD to reduce damage taken by 40% with Pain Suppression, say for a tank. The Kyrian Covenant ability also offers a pretty powerful cooldown, high damage and high healing that fits perfectly for discipline. So there's a lot to do and a lot to plan around your CDs and mechanics to make you super effective. Tons of damage reductions and absorptions, even passive ones like Lenience, that when used right, are all super powerful. Again, bear in mind, all of this in a raid setting can be tough for a beginner and quite punishing on gameplay mistakes. Again, high skill cap. In a smaller group environment, like say dungeons, this can be done slightly easier. Power Word Radiance easily applies atonement to the whole group with a single press, so as long as you have something to damage, it's pretty straightforward, even having AoE damaging abilities like Mindseer or Holy Nova, so you will be even more aggressive while managing atonements in dungeons. And you always have the option to use Shaman and Shadow Covenant for direct heals, which are thematically really cool, preventing you to use holy abilities from Shadow Covenant for a time, and have a curse effect on Shadowman if used in combat. But they do allow you to heal if there's nothing to damage for atonements, or you feel atonement healing isn't really cutting it. So deciding when to use or do whichever of these abilities are part of the learning curve, especially due to its downsides. In general though, you do like some reactive or emergency type of healing tools found on the other healers, making again disciplined priests quite punishing, but once that learning curve is passed and you are super comfortable with it, that for the most part ceases to be a problem. When it comes to utility, outside of damage reductions, there's no massive amount. Power Infusion is awesome to provide haste, mini bloodlust to a party member if you don't need it yourself. Sometimes you do because haste allows you to spread atonements quicker, so you can use that in preparation for big damage and so on. And additionally, if you like having these support type of abilities, the Night Fake Covenant offers more, sort of like the Paladins, offering these powerful buffs such as cooldown reductions or resource gains. There's also Leap of Faith, which is wonderful to move noobs away from fire. All non-priest healers are very likely to be pretty envious of this. Or Mass Dispel, which can be powerful in some dungeons and affixes, but you do lack general CC, only having more niche ones like Mind Soothe to skip packs and stuff, or Chackle. But hey, there has to be balance. If you already are one of the hardest hitting healers DPS wise, you couldn't have a massive amount of CC or utility in that sense as well. All in all, Discipline is a wonderful, unique healer. It's not for everyone, and certainly not for everyone's hands, but when played right, there's really powerful things you can do. Lots to learn. There's also something going on all the time, something to manage, decisions to make. It's super engaging. And in a general sense, if you like the idea of being a DPS but really want to get into healing, Discipline is a wonderful option, bearing in mind everything we said thus far, of course. What about the Holy spec then? Priests are actually in a pretty cool spot, because they have 2 specs dedicated to healing. So if you're super into healing, priests have the benefit of, if you get bored of one, you always have the other spec to change to. So what about Holy? Well, Holy is more of a traditional healer. In fact, it's possibly the most traditional classic healer in the game, having a balance between reactive type of abilities and proactive abilities, but it really is all about raw healing. The main gameplay here is actually surrounding holy words, Serenity and Sanctify. One is a massive single target heal, another is a group-wide one. They are on short cooldowns, but your regular healing abilities like Flash Heal, or simply Heal, or the group variant, Prayer of Healing, reduces the CDs of them respectively, with others like Binding Heal talent reducing both. So between making simple decisions of keeping up Prayer of Mending, so it keeps bouncing around, smart healing the group and heal and tank, and when to heal and when to flash heal, one being your regular healing ability on a long cast, the other the more emergency one that costs more mana, like when you really need a quick heal as an emergency, and between do you need a group heal or a single heal, do you need to apply a renew or a shield if you are on the move. The main idea here is to use your holy words as much as possible, reasonably mind you, so you can keep maximizing them with the cooldown reductions. So it's a pretty straightforward way of healing, no matter the content, it's kind of always the same, with excellent potential of just being this super reactive healer, being single target or group wide, just big splooges of healing, just blah, healing whenever people take damage, right? With the mastery, always applying a hot. Do not forget that, which is pretty powerful. The most daunting thing you are likely to find is just how many different abilities, healing abilities you have now baseline. I mean, from Prayer of Mending to Circle of Healing to Halo to Renew to the shields to regular heals, to small cooldowns. I mean, it can be quite a lot, while also managing the holy words. But I also quite enjoy having so many different healing buttons to press. It feels really cool, feels like a proper healer, though again, that will be subjective. One of the more objective cons, though, when it comes to group healing, is that a large spread, a bit like Resto Shamans, harms some of your tools, which, can suck a bit. What about cooldowns? Well, very powerful and fun cooldowns can also be found here, from your regular Divine Hymn, group-wide CD, to the Angel Form Apotheosis for a more powerful Holy Word, or the massive Holy Word Salvation, the talent providing a massive heal, a stack of Prayer of Mending and Renew for those heavy damage moments. It's so awesome to press. Utility-wise is basically the same as Discipline, like with the amazing Mass Dispel, Power Infusion and so on. Not much to add, but you do have Symbol of Hope being unique to you to provide a bit of mana to all healers in the group, which is pretty cool, making you feel more useful. You still have the ability to damage like Discipline for pretty cheap mana wise, but having no real benefit of side of just damaging. And unlike it, you do have a stun with Holy Word Chastise. So that can be useful sometimes, like interrupting an enemy or a nasty ability or interrupting a spell and so on. All in all, Holy is just that classic traditional healer, which many people seek. Just great and many fantastic healing tools that cover the whole healing spectrum. Powerful cooldowns, but having the downside of being a little bit squishy without much defensives or survivability tools, with that fragile feeling, and with not the most amazing mobility, but with a decent amount of instant casts to keep it going. It shouldn't be a problem at all, but overall solid, with nobody ever taking their place, the Holy Priest place. And lastly, we have the Mistweaver Monkey Monk, one of my personal favorite healers in terms of gameplay. The monk as a healer, their tools are kind of a mashup from all the other healers, with a great focus on having pretty fantastic sustained healing. So as you probably noticed, healers are pretty well balanced, with each spec having a thing they excel at. But why is that? Well, Mistweaver gameplay, the core surrounds around having two completely different builds, the Mistweaving playstyle and the Fistweaving playstyle. For simplicity's sake, let's cover Mistweaving, then go over Fistweaving a bit and see how that differs. So the main gameplay here will be around keeping up Renewing Mists, your main hot, that also smart heals in a similar way to Prayer of Mending meets Rejuvenation. This will allow your Vivify main heal ability to also heal any target with Renewing Mists. So that's pretty cool, transforming what otherwise is a single target healing ability into a group-wide one with tons of range. You also have Soothing Mist, a channel ability providing really great sustained heal on the target and making Vivify on that target instant cast. Just have to be careful to not overexpend mana. That temptation is very high. You also have Enveloping Mists as a more emergency, bigger heal to help top people up in heavier damage moments that also becomes instant cast during Soothing Mist. Essence Font will then cover group-wide healing and applies a hot. And remember, your mastery has a chance to heal a second time, basically, in many of your spells, called Gust of Mists. So the management here will be mana, keeping up mists, when to use Essence Font, when to use Enveloping Mists, and when to use Vivify or spam it. This will depend, of course, on the damage being taken by the group or raid, but also, again, your mana. You can overexpend very easily, so using things like Mana Tea will be something to manage and work around as well, if talented into it, to help on that front. That's possibly the biggest learning curve with Mistweavers is mana management, but in general you are essentially comboing healing abilities like Renewing Mists and Vivify, or Enveloping Mists and Soothing Mists, and so on and so forth. They are really pretty cool mechanics. Then there's also a few short cooldown abilities and big cooldowns, things like Thunder Focus Tea, to be used quite often, enhancing some abilities like Renewing Mists, lasting for longer, or a mana-free Vivify, and so on. So more management. Life Cocoon as a big emergency absorb, especially on tanks, and increasing the healing done. The new Invoke Jade Serpent cooldown, casting Soothing Mists to more targets, akin to your Soothing Mist Jade statue for even more sustained healing, or your Revival. Not as impressive as some other healing big raid-wide CDs, but does its job with a niche of dispelling everyone as well. So that's the Mistweaving playstyle. Standing back, managing Renewing Mists, Soothing Mists, Vivifies, and etc. Simply providing this really nice flow of healing. Fistweaving will then be the more aggressive, changing a couple of talents like the Yulon, the Jade Serpent, to the Chiji, the Crane, Rising Mists talent, and the other Crane talent that provides mana. Essentially, it will give your damaging abilities Rising Sun Kicks, Tiger Palms, Blackout Kicks, healing components, or boosting your healing abilities, such as increasing Renewing Mists or the Essence Font HOTS uptime, or providing mana on Blackout Kicks, or even with a new legendary causing Essence Font to provide a buff granting healing through your damaging abilities for a few seconds. So yeah, there's a big push or big benefits to go for Fistweaving. It will be far more aggressive and active, and with much fewer Soothing Mists channel spells if you really hate that. So like the Paladin, will be much more in the melee range to be effective and less in the ranged section, which is not always great in some encounters, weaving punches and healing abilities to keep the group alive, while also providing some meaningful damage. That said, all of this is pretty subjective on a playstyles. Some people live by fist weaving. Some people hate it, so it's up to you. But it's awesome that you have these two distinct playstyles in a single spec. Now, there are several more fundamental benefits to Mistweaver as a spec, like mobility. Monks are insane with mobility, and Mistweaver is no different. Not only you have many instant or on-the-move healing abilities, but you also have rolls, sprints that you also can provide it to teammates, and teleports, allowing you to move through the battlefield extremely easily. You also have an array of defensive cooldowns, making you able to withstand a lot of damage, akin to the Holy Paladin and the rest of Druid. And finally, you also provide a great CC and utility, from AoE stuns and Ring of Peace knockbacks, physical damage debuff, hard CC with paralysis. So yeah, there's a lot you can do outside of, simply healing or damaging. All in all, Mistweaver is tons of fun, like the other monk specs, with unique, fun mechanics with two distinct playstyles. They have some faults, like being thirsty for mana, not having a massive healing CD, or generally not so great in numbers, usually on the top end of things, but if you really dig the playstyle, go for it. It really is an engaging, fun healer. And that covers everything. Hopefully that helps a bit in your decision. Overall, again, each healer spec kind of has a thing that they are good at, or have a specific tool that makes them fun. And I personally really like that. It creates a really cool balance among the healer specs. As always, thank you for watching. For now, I'll be moving on over to proper Shadowlands guides to many of its systems, as that release is drawing ever closer now, and maybe later on do some ranks, some proper tier lists, focusing more on performance, just for fun, but I'm not sure if I'm gonna have the time for that. Alright guys, so again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you all next time.